Cool. Okay.
All right, everyone, welcome to Skip's Artist Showcase. On this episode, we have none other than singer, songwriter Colette McLafferty. And she's got a very, very interesting experience that we would like to share with all of you, and especially you aspiring artists out there. I think you're going to benefit from her experience. So, with that having been said, Colette, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Today I'm doing great.
Okay. And
Years
you're
later.
in the Chicago area, right?
I am, yes, I'm in the suburbs of Chicago.
Okay. So this is May of 2023. What kind
Mhm.
of weather do you have right there at the moment?
It's hot. It's about 70s.
Ooh, okay.
Which, it was like just last week that it was hailing. So, what they said, like if you don't like the weather in Chicago, wait a couple hours or like wait a day. So it's beautiful out today. So
Okay.
can't complain about that.
Okay. Well, here in Denver, I'll do you one up on that. We
Okay.
say if you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes.
Okay. It's been a minute since I've been to Denver, but
Mhm.
I
Okay.
feel you. I feel
Okay. Well, Colette, so let's start with this. Where are you originally from?
so I am actually originally from the suburbs of Chicago.
Mhm.
The house that I'm sitting in right now is the house that I grew up in.
Mm.
And it's the house that I left when I was 19 years old with a suitcase to go to New York City, and lived in New York City for 26 years. And then COVID happened and it
Mhm.
brought me back here.
Okay.
So it's a full circle moment.
Okay. So at what age did you start taking an interest in music?
Very young. Probably I would say around 9 or 10. I had a little piano and I was able to pick out melodies. In the fourth grade, we were able to join the school band. So I was doing choir, and then I also wanted to be in the band, and I wanted to play drums. They said, "Well, girls don't play drums," which that would
Well,
never.
yeah, they do. Yeah, they do now, especially now. Mhm.
I grew up in the 80s. So
Yeah.
so I was like, and I should have fought it, but I didn't know I wasn't an activist quite yet. So they wanted me to play the clarinet or the flute. And I said, no way. We compromised on saxophone. I didn't stay in the saxophone because I performed a song, and I remember my saxophone strap got caught in the button, and I just clunked out a bunch of notes. So I didn't really stay in the saxophone, but that's when it started. But my
Mhm.
first passion, the first thing that I wanted to do was to be a drummer.
Okay. All right. Well, it seems like in this modern era that we're in now, a lot of those cliches are gone now. You can do what you want.
Yep. Hmm. But back then, there were so many
Yeah.
boxes and regulations and rules.
Right.
And it took to get to where we are today, it took those people that were willing to stand up and say, oh, no, no, girls do play drums.
Right.
But
Right.
again, I wasn't an activist yet. So
Okay.
I did
Okay.
what I could.
Okay. Well, who were some of your musical influences?
So I would say number one, Prince and the
Mm.
Minneapolis sound. So I loved I loved commercial 80s music, and
Hmm.
that's really what I had access to at the time. So it was Prince, it was Madonna, Michael Jackson, Flock of Seagulls, like
Hmm.
Tiffany, New Kids on the Block, Duran Duran. But Prince in particular, I studied Prince and the Minneapolis sound and anything that it revolved around Prince as if it were a course that I needed to pass to graduate from grade school. I was obsessed with it. I used to buy the magazine Blackbeat a lot, which is
Hmm.
kind of funny,
Hmm.
like it, and I
Yeah.
carry it around. And I used to read up on like the feuds between Prince and Rick James, and then people would compare like the Mary Jane girls to Vanity Six, and Morris Day and the Time. Like
Hmm.
anybody that was in that realm, I was super obsessed with it.
Hmm.
And I was also writing, I had a column called Rock and Roll Music News when I was a kid. So I would read Black Beat, and Black Beat
Hmm.
was reporting on Purple Rain before the mainstream media did. So before MTV talked about Purple Rain, Black Beat was talking about Purple Rain, which was in production. So I would
Hmm.
read Black Beat, take some snippets, and put it into my column, Rock and Roll Music News. So I was like the kid at school that knew that Prince was making a movie before they started talking
Hmm.
about it on TV. So that was my obsession, was Prince.
Okay. So Colette, you talked about initially wanting to be a drummer, then
Yeah.
you kind of went to the saxophone, but then
Mhm.
eventually you landed as a singer. So when did you finally say, okay, this is what I'm going to do?
So I was taking choir, and so that happened very organically. And oh, there was also the Barbara Mandrell show, which I gotta mention Barbara Mandrell. I would
I
watch
remember.
the Three Sisters and like sing along to that. And because I'm in choir and because I have these opportunities to sing, and because I'm not getting on the instrument of my choice, singing was it just kind of happened naturally. And then I
Mhm.
got into the school plays like Bye Bye Birdie and Godspell. I started doing community theater, and then I eventually ended up in a performing arts high school, the Chicago Academy for the Arts, as a vocal major. And they had us performing all the time. We performed at the Daily Center. If there was a film that needed to audition kids our age, we got auditions. We went to Oprah's studio like the first week. It was wild. I almost didn't audition. Like I did it because my friend did. Like they had turned me down one year, and then
Mhm.
I thought I would never go, but then my friend got accepted the next year. And I was like, let me just try again. And then they accepted me. So it
Mhm.
was just kind of a natural progression.
Okay. So with all of that you just said, at what point did you say to yourself, I think I want to pursue this professionally?
So when I was singing at the Chicago Academy of the Arts, we really did have like this professional experience. We were always performing, always like different events at outdoor events. The caliber of the material that we were producing as kids was
Mhm.
it was really exquisite. And even
Mhm.
in the I remember we did a production of Cabaret. We weren't even just doing the musical, we were building the sets. We were learning about the lights that shined upon us on the stage. And I was just so in love with that experience. And we were also always encouraged to go out and audition. So I started auditioning professionally when I was in high school. And it took me a
Mhm.
little while to get my first professional gig. I got it like right after high school. Um,
Mhm.
so that was just it was organic. Like my first year out of high school, I didn't get into any of the colleges that I wanted to because like my academic grades were not great. But I started working professionally as a vocalist right out of high school. So that very first year, um, I quit my job at McDonald's, and I'm working it's like a full year, and I'm making paychecks as a vocalist. And then I'm
Mhm.
thinking, oh, I went on tour with the children's theater company for about a year, played these Broadway style houses, did summer stock in Shawnee, Pennsylvania. And at that point, I was like, I think this is it. I think I have a shot at this. And then I got on a
Mhm.
Greyhound bus with about $1,500 in my pocket and went to New York City.
Mhm. Okay. And so then when you got to New York, you hooked up with some other musicians there as well. Did you join a band there, or were you kind of a freelance independent?
So initially, I really wanted to do musical theater. I saw myself on Broadway.
Mhm.
And when I got there, I went to the American Musical and Dramatic Academy, and I was studying musical theater, but I got very caught up into the gritty New York City lifestyle. I realized that like while I was studying musical theater, it was my vibe was getting a little grittier. It was getting more underground. And musical
Mm-hmm.
theater was very polished, very yeah, it was very polished and always
Mm-hmm.
on point and very on, where music could be raw and angry
Right.
and
Right.
emotional and not so perfect. And so I became a part, I was a part of this little clique. We were the stoner clique. And there were times when we didn't go to class because we were just like in our dorm rooms, like, writing these angsty songs on guitar. And that just felt more natural to me.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I'm kind of losing interest in musical theater because I see this new thing that just resonates more.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also getting caught up in the nightlife in New York City.
Right.
And
Right.
so it all kind of goes together. And I remember my first gig, I finally got offered a gig, and it was a performance artist. Her name was AC Slater, and she would dance on point to Led Zeppelin songs. And I came out and I did one song. And from that, I just started getting gigs, making connections. I got a job waitressing at a music venue called the Dark Star Lounge. And I started playing with all these session players who would like, they were playing with Billy Joel, um, like Ace Frehley from Kiss
Yeah.
would pop
Mm-hmm.
it, it's just like
Mm-hmm.
whoever was on the charts at that moment, the session players on their days off were coming to the Dark Star Lounge to play. There
Mm-hmm.
was a Bobby Nathan's Blues Jam that I showed up, I'd be waitressing, then I'd get up and sing. So it all just happened very organically up until that
Mm-hmm.
point, and I started playing around town.
Okay. All right. So I guess I now want to jump into this situation that evidently turned out to be a serious
Yeah,
distraction in your life and in your career. And
sure.
this is the circumstance where you were actually sued, not alone, I guess some of your other uh,
Three of us.
co-bandmates were included, but you were sued for being in a cover band. So Colette, I want you to take us through that journey. Uh, I mean, this is going to be the meat
Yeah,
and potatoes of this thing because when
yeah.
I read the title, I thought to myself, I've never heard of anything like this. So take us through that journey. You were sued for being in a pink cover band. Take us from day
Sure.
one.
So I'll back roll just a little bit to give you a small snapshot of my career of what happened before I started getting into cover bands.
Mm-hmm.
I had a record deal with a band called Edible Red, and we auditioned a lot of different people. When Edible Red broke up, I was solely focused on session singing, and I was working as a studio vocalist, mostly doing demos, commercials, stuff like that. That was my main point. But I missed the stage. I really missed getting on stage. So I remember just putting it out there on social media like, hey guys, I'd really love if anyone has a tribute band or a cover band that I can work in. I'm putting out feelers. So I got a message from this guy named Rick, and Rick had auditioned for Edible Red years prior, but I didn't put two and two together at first that was the same person. And he said, my friend Chuck and I are putting together this pink cover band. Would you be interested? And it was funny because I had applied to a pink cover band on Craigslist. So I said, is this the same band on Craigslist? And he said, yeah. And I'm like, oh, absolutely. This sounds phenomenal. He said to me, I showed your videos to Chuck straight away. I think you're going to be really, impressed with this band. And he told me that Chuck was in a band called Soraya, which they had their moment. They were on MTV too. They had a couple minor hits, and I was so excited to work in this project. I just thought this could be incredible. So a couple of weeks go by, I don't hear anything. Then I get a phone call from Rick and said, "Hey, Chuck, he's had a lot of success in this industry. he says he wants to keep looking for a singer, but you're more than welcome to audition. And at that point, I kind of lost interest, but I was polite and I said, okay, send me the songs. The songs never come. That's fine. Then a few months later, I'm told that Chuck is no longer in the project. Would I still be interested? I said no. Then I got another message like a few weeks later, and Rick had said, hey, I'm auditioning drummers for this project. Would you mind coming down and singing? I'll pay you. Like, it'll just be a session job. So I said, sure. So I go to, it was in Long Island, and I'm told, Chuck really did not like you. And I'm like, okay. I thought it was weird that like he would tell me this. And I wasn't a fan of that. But I didn't take too much stock in it. And every week I would show up, I'd get like $75 for showing up to rehearsal. And while he's building this band, I'm learning more about the relationship between Rick and Chuck. I'm under the impression that Chuck just left the band, right? I find out that Rick is being investigated for fraud by a bank. I can't remember if it was Citibank or Chase Bank, but it's actually in the 112-page lawsuit. And I'm starting to get this, and he ended up being completely clear of the charges, but the investigation was happening. And he tells me this, and I'm getting that like, uh-oh, you got to get out of this band, got to get out. But I'm scared, right? I'm scared because I can see that there's some negative words being said on social media towards Chuck. And it's apparent to me that Rick and Chuck are feuding in some capacity.
So now, Colette, let me ask you this. Is Chuck the one who initiated the lawsuit?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I just need to, because you're saying Chuck and Rick. I'm trying to place who they're at in the theme of this.
So Rick is the guy that hired me for the Pink cover band. Chuck is the guy that was in the Pink cover band with Rick, but Chuck dispersed before I actually came into the picture to work as a session vocalist for the band.
Okay.
And I'm being led to believe that Chuck just left. What I don't know is at this point, Chuck is actually starting his own Pink cover band. He and Rick, instead of just, starting his own band and being quiet about it, Rick is on Facebook talking about what a loser Chuck is and throwing mud. So they're having a real rift. Yeah.
It's kind of childish to do that on social media.
Like the two of them are, to this day, I will say they are teenage girls.
Yeah. So, yeah. And it's too much of that on social media, but it's out there.
So much. So I'm thinking, I got to get out, but I'm still showing up to rehearsal and just saying, hey, I don't know how much longer I can do this. I didn't want to like rip off the Band-Aid. I was afraid that I would get trashed on social media. And the band is great, by the way. The band is great. Like the player, like for all my issues with Rick for like what happened as a band leader, he was fantastic. He got the best people, best attitudes. Everyone got along really well, which is probably why I stayed a little longer than I should have. And but I'm learning more and more about this rift. And I'm saying you got to get a different singer. I can't keep doing this. We get offered a show, and I don't want to do the show, right? But I decide to do it. Well, I get a text message from Rick saying, hey, you're about to get a letter. And I was like, an email? And he said, no, a letter. Apparently it's from Chuck. It's a cease and desist letter. So I come home to a cease and desist letter from Chuck, and it's saying, you cannot perform under this name. If like, here's what could happen if you do. It mentions tax liens, having my assets frozen, going to jail for maybe, no, it said, I think the language was no more than 10 years. It was very threatening. At this point, I don't know anything about the legal system, so I don't know about the game of empty threats, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have to remember that Chuck is a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
So Rick decides to change the band name to appease Chuck. And I'm like, that's great. Yes, change the name. Problem solved. We get a second cease and desist letter now for the new band name. Even though Chuck had not applied for the trademark yet, he like sent the letter and then, because I looked it up and then like applied for the trademark. So at this point, even though I want out of the band, now I want to do this one show just because I know that what he is doing is wrong, is
Right.
okay.
Right.
So we do the show. It's at Napper Tandy's in Long Island. We're opening up for a band called The Big Show. And everybody, like, we are just oh wait, nope, sorry, gotta backtrack. Rehearsal. That's where I got sued.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I got sued. Okay. So we have the rehearsal before our one and only show. It's going great. The band is so well rehearsed. And I said, this is going too well. As I say that, in walks a process server into the rehearsal studio.
With the papers, huh?
And we're all laughing. We think it's the funniest thing in the world, right? Goes up to Rick, and I'm dying laughing. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, because I don't understand how serious it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rick's laughing. We're all laughing. Then goes up to a second player. His name's John. We're still laughing. I'm still laughing. Then he comes up to me. And it's like, what? And it's 112 pages long. So we finish rehearsal. A band member drives me home. And I'm thumbing through the papers and I see, I didn't really know what an allegation was yet. I just see like that it's accusing me of all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's accusing me of conspiring to steal his Chuck's band away from him while he's getting surgery on his shoulder. And he painted it as if Rick, John, and I were conspiring to get the band out there first to cut him out of the market because he wanted to have the first pink cover band in Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
And then also through the complaint, there's a lot of mudslinging. Most of the mudslinging is against Rick because that is his former friend. I had
Mm-hmm.
never met Chuck, never met him at this point.
Mm-hmm.
He said that John looked like a plumber. And then within the 112-page complaint, there's about a page and a half of insults thrown at me. So Chuck talks about seeing my videos on YouTube and hating my singing. Like this is in the lawsuit. He said that I sang flat for an entire verse. I couldn't really sing, and that I wasn't attractive enough to play the part of Pink. And my heart's just sinking because when I was initially presented with this offer, I was really excited to, I saw Soraya. I thought they were a great band. And I was really excited to work with someone on that level. So the fact that I was also deceived, I've read bad reviews about myself, but not in a lawsuit.
Right.
But the things that were said about me, yeah, they matter. It's important, but it's not the most important part of the case.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The most important part of the case is actually painting us as these people that conspired to steal his business away from him while he was getting surgery. And the
Mm-hmm.
rift that, the elder fraud investigation was a big part of it. And the rift between the two of them was the meat and potatoes of the case.
Right. And it just spilled over into you and the other guy, huh?
And what I learned, I didn't know this at the time, but what I learned was that it was a common tactic to drag in third parties. When something that people don't understand is that the legal system often is used as a tool of abuse and harassment.
Yeah. Oh, no question. I won't go through what I've been through, but this is your story.
Well, another podcast, part two. Um, so, and at that time, I don't know this. I don't have this information. I don't understand why I'm being dragged into this.
Mhm.
So I sent Chuck an email and I said, hey, I'm just a session singer here. I was hired to do a job and I'm doing it. And so that initial set of papers, that was to shut down the show that we were about to do. It was more like, if you go ahead and do the show at Napper Tandy's, we're going to be in litigation.
Mhm.
And here's the thing. I got advice from my fellow, session musicians. Don't do the show. It's not worth it. Like, you don't want to like get in a lawsuit for like a $75 gig. But what I'm thinking is like, you shouldn't be able to use a lawsuit to shut down somebody's gig.
Mhm.
If feuding band members sued each other all the time when they pissed each other off, there would be no music. Like we
Yeah.
have no music.
Yeah.
So at this point, even though I want to walk away from this band, I'm not really looking forward to doing the show. But now I feel like I have to do the show because
Yeah.
I don't quite understand the mess that I'm in yet. But I know that it sets a dangerous precedent to just cancel your gig
Yeah.
because this guy who has no legal claim to what's going
Yeah.
on
Mhm.
wants to use
Well,
the attorney.
to me, Colette, it seems that the normal sense of justice that we have, it seems like that's what came out in you, which is why you wanted to now move forward with doing the gig. Because I mean, we all when injustice hits us all, there's a response to that, and it seems like that's how you responded.
That's how I responded.
Mhm.
I did the gig. I did the gig. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm
How
giving
did it
my,
go?
it went great. It went really
Okay.
well.
Hmm.
I will say, I was a little bit on autopilot, but I was really well rehearsed at this point. And I did my best not to think about the lawsuit, but it was great. I mean, the band that he put together was fantastic, and I felt that everybody deserved to at least have this gig. I didn't want to see the band fall apart after rehearsing so much. So it went great. Um, Gig goes great. I go home. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to give 2 weeks notice, getting out of here. They even had a possible replacement that looked exactly like Pink at the last rehearsal to watch the show because Rick knew that I wasn't going to be staying. And
Hmm.
get a knock at my door, open it up. This guy, he looked like just like Seth Rogen. He's like, "Here you go." And so now it's official. Like I am officially in the court system.
Hmm.
I have no idea what to do. Rick says, "Don't worry about it. I'm going to answer. I'll answer for the three of us." You can't do that. I didn't know that. So I was like, "Oh, great. That's fantastic." Now here's where it gets very synergistic. So I do believe this was a predestined event in my life. I happened to be working with a real estate attorney who was negotiating a buyout with my landlord at the time to buy me out of my apartment in the Lower East Side. We were already working together. And he asked me, he said, "Are you ready to get started with this?" And I said, "Martin, something really strange happened." I said, "I just got sued for $10 million by a total stranger. Do I need to wrap that up first?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I know. If you're in litigation." He's like, "What happened?" I told him the story. He said, "Send me the papers. Let me look at it." He takes a look at it. He calls me up. He's dying. He cannot stop laughing. And
Yeah. Yeah.
he's like, "Don't worry. I am not charging you for this call." He is just doubling over with laughter. He's hyperventilating because it's so
Hmm.
funny. And it is funny. If you read that the lawsuit is funny. He's like, "Okay, here's what we're gonna do." He's like, "I will I'll represent you in this because it's such a
Yeah.
dumb
It's so
case.
frivolous, huh?
It's so frivolous. It's so frivolous. I'm going to represent you. And then, he wasn't going to charge me anything up front. He said, when we do the buyout and, I take off my fee, I'll just add some money and he gave me an incredibly cheap rate. I was like, great. What Martin doesn't realize, and I don't realize, because Rick answered for the three of us, and it's not the right thing to do. It was the wrong thing to do. I had not answered in time to the courts. So I would say anyone getting sued, you have to answer. You have time to get legal
Representation.
I was gonna say thank you. The word was escaping me. So my lawyer asks Chuck, hey, I didn't realize that she didn't make her filing date. Can you please give us an extension? Chuck sent an email and said, the answer is no. He said something about Rick. Rick can't stop shooting his mouth off on social media and said, it is because of him that your client is in the unenviable position of being in my crosshairs. So he essentially said, she needs to stay quiet unless if she wants a second lawsuit for defamation of character. So facts are not defamation. All I was doing, I decided to be very open on social media to let people know what was going on. I was not going to be quiet for even 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, he does not want to let me out of this lawsuit. I talked to Martin. I said, should I go to the press? Because we knew that if we were to get Chuck's name in the media, that he's likely going to drop the case.
Mm-hmm.
So I call a bunch of media outlets. And one day, I did not want to call the New York Post, but I had a couple glasses of Cabernet, got up my courage. It was like 10 o'clock at night. And I call them thinking I'm just going to leave a message. This guy, Tom Wilson, he was a copy boy. He happened to be at the tip desk. He picks up the phone. I tell him what's going on. And he was like, okay, how much are you getting sued for? Where did you perform? He knows it's a story, right? So a reporter named Leah Ustowich calls me. I'm talking to her for like 3 days on the phone. And I feel like, even though it's a reporter, it feels like a friend to me because
Mm-hmm.
I can tell her every detail of what's going on. And I'm scared. I'm
Mm-hmm.
really, really scared. Even though it's frivolous and it's dumb, I'm terrified.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking for the first couple of days, we're talking about the real issues, which was, the fraud investigation between Rick and Chuck, their dynamic, the fact that there was 3 of us. There was, at the time, there was like 43 allegations. I was accused of conspiracy for fraud and torturous interference and all these terms that it was scary. Like, even though it was the civil court system, I felt like a criminal, like the way I was being portrayed in this, or that I felt like I was being portrayed as a criminal. And on day 3, she says, how did you feel when he called you unattractive? And I was like, oh, I don't think that matters. I was like, it's in there. It's such a small detail of the case. And like,
Mm-hmm.
I really don't think we should be focusing on that. These are the real issues, especially what was going on between Rick and Chuck. She kept calling me back over and over and over again, rephrasing the question. And I realized that they were going to make this a talking point. And I wasn't happy about it. But at the same time, I knew that it was essential to get this case in the media because people needed to know that this was happening.
Mm-hmm.
So And I will say Leah was quite young at the time. She was only 24. And I'm going to go on record to say that I think the New York Post kind of used her like, hey, this is a young woman. She can talk to Colette woman to woman, get her to open up, you know.
Hmm.
I would love to talk to Leah today and see how she feels about it. But
Right.
I'd like to talk to a lot of people today. Uh, so I tell my friend, I was like, hey, when the paper comes out, tell me how bad it is. You know, I know it's going to be bad, but I don't know how bad it's going to be. But I get up really early and I get to the deli. It's like 7:30 in the morning and I find the paper and I open it up. I'm on page 3 and there's Pink and then there's me. Oh, and I should also mention they sent a photographer to my house. They would
Mm.
not take any of my photos. The photographer that shot me would not let me see the photos. He made sure to like shoot me from below, which everybody knows is like the worst angle. He posed me and stuff. It's not the worst photo, but it's not a great photo of me, right?
Hmm.
And I see the headline: singer sued for being too old and too ugly for Pink cover band.
Mm. 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 So how did you feel reading that?
Well, shocked,
Hmm.
stunned. Um, then, the same sinking feeling that I had when I read that about myself in a lawsuit, it brought up like a lot of like, high school. People told me I was ugly all the time when I was in high school. It brought up a lot of that childhood trauma.
Hmm.
And then, but it was also kind of funny because it was so absurd. And like,
Right.
it was like that very tabloid thing. And all these emotions are happening at once. And I go to the counter to pay, and the cashier was like, hey, that's you. You're in the paper. And like, but he thought it was the coolest thing in the world, right?
Hmm.
So I take the paper, I go home, and I'm thinking, okay, you know what? This really sucks. But it's the New York Post. Like, nobody thinks this is actual news, right? Like, it'll last like a day or two.
Right.
I don't know is that it started to go viral.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
everybody is reporting the same fake story.
Mm.
So the way the New York Post put it together, they made it look like we were going to do a gig. Rick wanted me on the gig. Chuck did not. Rick went ahead and had me sing. And because of that, Chuck sued me for $10 million because I was so old, so ugly, and untalented that I ruined his chance to have like the first Pink cover band on Long Island.
Hmm.
It's
So Colette, so just as a slick, interruption, I mean a quick interruption, while you're going through your part of this, what are the other guys doing? Are they fighting back as well? Or I don't want to take you too off of your thought, but it just
yeah.
seems like all of a sudden you've become the focus of this whole thing when it started with Rick. So are they fighting back as well, or what?
So the second that I was in litigation, I told Rick I could not speak to him anymore. I said, if you want to, because Rick thought that I was going to like join forces with him and fight. Like, he's like, oh, I have this lawyer that we can go in. And I said, no, I'm not paying for your lawyer. Like, you know, so at this point, I told him, if you want to communicate with me, you must go through my lawyer who is representing me only. So I wasn't quite sure what was going on with them just
Mhm.
yet.
Mhm.
I do know that Rick had said to Leah, like, well, that's not really what happened, but if that's the angle you want to take, because the New York Post did interview Rick in depth.
Mhm.
Um, John just wanted it out of his life. So at this point, I don't have contact with anyone in the band because I have to make it very clear to Chuck that I am a separate entity. I have nothing to do with Rick. I'm not part of his choices. Um, and then so I hadn't really gotten caught up on where they were at with it at that point. So but then it starts going viral. So Time Magazine, singer sued for not being attractive enough. FindLaw.com, a legal publication. Pink cover band ruined by bad ugly singer, $10 million lawsuit reports. Yahoo News, singer sued for ruining Charles Bonfante's cover band. Perez Hilton, outrageous, singer gets sued for being too old and ugly. CBS Radio, hundreds of radio stations, legal blogs, they are all reporting this story that is not true.
Yeah. See, Colette, let me say this. That's the media. Wow. Just very quickly, I had an experience years and years ago. As a drummer, I was, doing some stuff, and a paper did an article on me. And when the article came out, there were things that the way I said them, they were reworded. It's like,
Yep.
that's not what I meant to say. That's when I began to be suspicious about media. And I'm talking 30 years ago. I said, boy, the media, what, what a game. That all they are is a game. That's all the media is a game. And that's why even in doing this show, I want the reality to come out, not the game.
And I think that's why media like this is so important. And I think that's why people are clinging to it, right? I think people love this type of media, just this conversation that we're having, because with media like this, you can get to the truth of the matter.
Right.
And back then in 2014, we didn't yeah, this new media was around, but it wasn't around like it is. Now I feel like this is the default media. And
Right.
the legacy media is kind of like that stuff on the side. We're back in 2014, it was flipped. So
Yeah.
so it goes viral.
Right.
I get a call from my lawyer. Chuck wants to drop the case. He makes up, this is what I'm told. Oh, he heard that you got duped by Rick. He wants to drop the case. I'm thinking, oh, great, fantastic. We'll drop the case, and then I will reach out to all the media outlets and let them know that they have the wrong story, and then they can correct themselves, right? Or issue retractions or take it down. And I'm told Chuck is drafting up an NDA for you to sign so that you will agree to never speak about it publicly again, and you will agree to never talk to the media again. And so I said, how much is he paying me? And look, my silence could have been bought.
Yes, it's time to start flipping it. It's time to start flipping it now.
I had a number in my head, and it was not it. It could have bought me a house.
Yeah.
So
So, Colin, okay, hold that just very quickly. So, to the point to where you're at right now, as far as you know, did somebody get with this Chuck guy and said, this is ridiculous, right? Did anybody tell him that?
yes. So it was for like 3 days. It was huge. Everybody was talking about it. It made a stir in the Long Island cover scene. I won't give away too much, but yeah. But the thing is that Chuck is so blinded by his rage over Rick, trashing him on Facebook, and then, beating him to the market with a pink cover band. So Chuck didn't want to give me any money to sign an NDA. I was told, well, zero. You'll just sign that NDA for him to drop it. And I was like, oh, no. I was like, I have my number. So his second offer was to pay for half of my legal fees. And I said, okay, wait, my legal fees were up to $3,200. And I was like, let me get this straight. I'm supposed to pay $1,600 to let a man insult me and bully me? No. I said, he can come up with a number that doesn't insult me, and then we can speak. He could have also just dropped it, right? Because he knew it was wrong, but he didn't. So essentially what happened was that we fought the case for 2 years, and he would, every few months, he'd be like, hey, I'll drop this case if she agrees to never speak about it publicly again. And each time I said no, or like I I still gave him the opportunity to pay me, but he didn't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I also knew that I was going to write a book. Like at somewhere around month 2, month 3, I'm like, oh, I'm writing a book about this. And that's how it went. Like at one point, I hooked up with the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York, and we went to the New York State Assembly and met with senators to introduce, anti-lawsuit abuse legislation. It never passed, but we did get to the point where it was introduced on the floor, and we had,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 5 assembly people and a senator. Like I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to show Chuck,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, no, you are. And so many people said, let it go, pay your legal fees, get this thing out of your life. Oh, I started a blog too. I was like, as long as I am in litigation, I'm talking about it on social media, I'm blogging about it, I'm doing interviews, because there's no excuse for this being in my life. And then
Yeah.
eventually the
Yeah.
case got thrown out of court
Mm-hmm.
2 years later.
Yeah. Well, Colette, I'm, because of just who I am, where I came from, and what I have experienced. I'm glad that you fought back. I just learned, and I owe my father this, but he always told me, if you let people kick you in the teeth, they'll keep doing it.
Mhm,
And I have to learn. We're going to stop this. We're going to stop this now. So
mhm.
I'm just glad that you fought back. And here's what's interesting. Here, you're the female amongst these males, and you're the one that has
Mhm.
I don't want to use these male expressions, but you're the one that had the I'm gonna say the gumption
Okay, okay.
to fight back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So, you've mentioned about the healing process, and
Yeah.
and you said it puts you in therapy and things of that sort. Uh, you know, are you done with that? Are you still doing it, or where are you at with that?
So I have come to the conclusion that I don't think therapy ever stops. You do take a break, but I believe that when you have something that's very traumatic that you live
Mhm.
through, um, you have to revisit it every few years. Because if you don't, you could slide backwards. I had a lot of coping mechanisms
Mhm.
like those 2 years. So, um, I drank, I didn't drink to the point where I was alcoholic or, blacking out or fighting people, but I did drink to the point where I had to feel a little bit dull. I
Mhm.
couldn't, because it was this double whammy of both the media and the legal system. Like it wasn't just David and Goliath, it was like David and Goliath, like two
Mhm.
monster entities
Mhm.
um that I felt like it was devouring me. Um, so I think that if you don't talk about it or if you don't keep doing the work, you might find yourself falling back into those patterns. So I'm not in therapy right now, but I've been through a ton of it.
Mhm.
But if those feelings start to creep up again, then it's time to go back to therapy.
Right, I understand. So you said this initially got started in 2014. So from 2014 up until when did you finally feel, comfortable and ready to get back into singing again and just, pursuing that part of your life again?
So while I was in litigation, fortunately, I actually eventually did get a buyout because when it looked like Chuck was not going to win the case, I was able to take a buyout, but it was much lower so it was nice. I had a little bit of a cushion. I left my apartment. I moved to Bushwick. I started getting involved more in session work. So I was a little bit blacklisted in New York City because of the fact that I was talking about this case, and a lot of people they wanted no association with it. And also I had, people knew I was kind of drinking to cope and I wasn't really the best version of myself as a singer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what I started doing, I started working with people internationally online who didn't know about the case.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I I started working on this website called Vocalizer. Um, and I worked with I started doing some house music, deep house, EDM, working with anyone from like a major DJ to a bedroom producer. And I worked with producers from God, so many countries: Japan, Italy,
Mhm.
the Netherlands, Germany. And because they didn't really know about what was going on, I didn't I wasn't being judged.
Yeah, you didn't have to explain anything.
And also, ageism against women in the music industry, when I got sued, was at an all-time high, right? So if you said you were a 40-year-old singer at that time, it was like, oh, well, you're done. That's not the case today,
Right.
thankfully. Um, or, in those scenes, because I was more in a pop rock scene that had like age cutoffs and stuff.
Mhm.
So, but these people didn't care. Like that same climate in these other countries, the age cutoff wasn't so much of a thing, right? So,
Mhm.
and a lot of the people that I worked with were half my age and they were just happy to have me. Where in New York City, I was being told, like, oh my God, I can't believe they printed your age in a newspaper. Like, some people thought that was the most tragic thing, was that my age was printed. And I
Mhm.
couldn't go by my showbiz age anymore. So it was really the complete strangers on the website Vocalizer that helped me like get back into it. And um it inspired me to learn more about recording myself, production. And I
Mhm.
started learning more about electronic music, like all the little subgenres. Because before I started, I didn't know a trance track from a house track, or, or industrial garage.
Mhm.
Now
Right.
that I've done more of that work, I know the little subgenres and stuff. But they were the
Okay.
ones that welcomed me with open arms.
Okay. So you wrote a book about your experience and you're getting ready to write a second book. What's the purpose of the second book?
So it's dual purpose. So the version of Confessions of a Bad Ugly Singer, oh no, it was on New Haven Publishing. That's the first edition. When I wrote that version of the book, I was still early in my healing. So it was like I had to relive everything over again. And now I have clarity, I have peace, I have a sense of peace that I did not have back then.
Mhm.
So I'm working on a second edition of that, so it could just be a better book. Uh,
Mhm.
and I'm also in the very early stages of planning a book it's like a self-help and healing book for people in the legal system.
Mhm.
It's in
Okay.
its infancy. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if you can, I maybe kind of like succinctly kind of nail it down, what would you like, artists or people in this industry to learn from your experience? Because again, it's unique. It seems like it's a one in a billion
Yep.
experience,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that one time did happen. Is there anything that, artists, aspiring artists can learn from your experience that you feel?
So the first thing is that it's a jungle out there. The music industry, it is like a game of what's that game where like you can't step on a bomb? Like you have to step on a square. I don't know if it's Minecraft or Minefield.
I don't know.
It's a
I,
minefield.
I don't play games.
Okay. Um, so a lot of people in the music industry are going to present you with an opportunity. Many times it's overblown.
Mhm.
Like it's going to Broadway, or we're going to get this star, that star. Um, a lot of times it's not as big as they say it's going to be. You really got to vet people. I will tell you, when I was approached with this gig, my gut said, don't do it, danger, danger. And I did it anyway. Um,
Right.
if you ever feel that like
Yeah.
pit
Yes.
in your
Yes.
chest,
Yeah.
or in your gut, or if words are not matching up with actions,
Mhm.
um, you really gotta spend a little time with people just to know that it's the right thing to do. Like if
Mhm.
someone, and this is a little unrelated, but there were times where maybe a rapper would invite me to the studio to sing a verse, and I go to the studio, and we're just hanging out. Like they're rapping, but they don't invite me on the mic, and I'm like, oh, they just want me to hang out with them, And so
Yeah. Yeah.
especially, it's all genders need to be careful, but
Right.
if you're a girl, if you're a woman,
Yeah.
sometimes it's not really a music opportunity. They just want to hang out with you.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm not going to say it's just rappers. I had it with like booking agents and,
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. We know those games too.
it's like, hey, let's jam, and then like if
Yeah.
no one's jamming, pay attention to words and actions, pay attention to that gut in your chest.
Yeah.
Don't let anyone bully you in the music
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
bullies out there,
Oh
right?
yeah. For sure.
Shut it down.
Yeah. Very quickly. Very quickly.
And
Yeah.
if you shut it down, the good people, you're going to figure out who the good people are.
Yeah. And those people will come, because this is what I've discovered, Colette. You start to find out that the circle of people who take a stand the way you do, they have integrity, they have good intentions. Those people will eventually find each other. I that's been my experience. I mean, it's taken some time, but I have found those people.
It does take time. It does take time. And also, I think that when you're starting out, you want to make it so bad, you want to make progress so bad that it can be tempting to listen to the promises of a project that aren't going to be there. Or it can be tempting. I've gone down the wrong path many times, not
Mhm.
just with this
Mhm.
lawsuit.
Right.
It's okay if your journey takes time. It's okay if you're not famous yet. It's okay if you have 50 streams on your last song,
Yeah.
just you want to meet those people that are really going to be in the long haul with you. You want to collaborate with those people that 10 years later you're still like blown away by the collaboration you did together. You can still call
Right.
each other up.
Hmm.
It is a lot of weeding out.
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
have
for
to
sure.
you have to
Yes.
vet people.
Yeah. So if you're able to collect to talk about it, but do you know the current status of the other, Chuck and the other two that were involved? Do you know what their status is today? And
Oh
and
yeah.
are you able to talk about it?
Yeah, oh yeah. So here's the thing. My lawyer told Chuck she's going to talk about it whenever she wants. Like we laid down that law since he didn't want to pay me anything for my
Right.
time.
Right.
So here's what I know. When the lawsuit was over, there was a hearing at the Supreme Court of Riverhead to discuss Chuck's conduct as a lawyer. And so Rick
Mm.
was there, Chuck was there. I didn't really want to have contact with Rick, but I will say that when I was on the stand and I looked at the judge and I said, I think the legal system is a joke and a disgrace. And the fact that I'm here is unacceptable. Rick was just kind of like sitting there, like, and like Chuck's like eyes are like this. So Chuck actually had 3 separate lawsuits against Rick personally, is my understanding. Rick settled it for about, I believe the figure was $1,500. The case against
All of that for $1,500? You gotta be kidding.
and you have to remember Chuck was representing himself, so he didn't have legal fees, right? It wasn't until the very last day where we were discussing him that he finally got a lawyer. And even his own lawyer said, Chuck, what are you doing here? So that's where that is at. I think Rick had like a Def Leppard cover band or something. I did like check up on him just once to see what
Yeah.
happened.
Right.
And I think he has, I might be saying the wrong band, but I think he has a different cover band. Um, Unfortunately with John, he was so heartbroken by this lawsuit. He signed away when the New York Post thing came out. He signed that he would never speak about it. Uh,
Mm. Mm.
so, and I haven't seen him since then, but my understanding was that at the time he was so heartbroken by what had happened, He had invested like $5,000 into new gear for this project, and he said he would never touch his guitar again. I hope that's not true.
Wow.
I hope that I have not, really kept tabs too much on them.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I really hope he found his healing. And
Mhm.
I also believe my opinion is that even though he signed that document, I believe since the case itself was fraudulent and since he signed that under duress, I believe that that agreement should be revoked in case if you
Mhm.
wanted to speak about it. So I just want to
Right.
say
Right. Because it's possible speaking about it could aid in the healing process, you know? Yeah.
absolutely.
Right.
I could not imagine if I had signed that NDA.
Yeah.
And if all those headlines were out there about me and I couldn't talk about it, I could not,
Yeah.
I can't
Yes.
fathom.
It's like being suffocated. Yeah.
Yeah, I
You
can't
can't
feel.
breathe. Yeah.
Yeah,
So what about this Chuck? Is he still a lawyer as far as you know, or
a lawyer. Yep.
wow, who?
Yeah. So here's my understanding. We researched Chuck thoroughly to see if he had a history of this. Fortunately, he did not. Um, I was told that he did run his mouth from time to time about suing people. Uh,
Hmm.
it didn't seem like he had a history of frivolous conduct. It didn't seem like he had a history of using his position to sue people fraudulently, because the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York investigated him thoroughly.
Hmm.
Um, I insisted he pay my legal fees. We settled for legal fees and an apology. I got a public apology, right? I got
Hmm.
my legal fees. I never got the public apology.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I would like to go on record to say that Chuck is still welcome to publicly apologize to me anytime. So
Okay.
I had lunch with him. That's what's so weird. It's like after meeting him for the first time, after being in the legal system for 2 years and just losing all of it, like
Mhm.
losing my mind. My lawyer, me, and Chuck went out and had lunch, and he apologized to me. And here's the thing, Chuck was not, in my mind, I thought I was going to just see him and hate him. And that didn't happen.
Mhm.
Even though what Chuck did was unacceptable, there should have been something in the legal system that should have been able to swoop in and say, no, you can't do this. You're a lawyer,
Mhm.
right? That's those procedures are not in place.
Yeah.
So something that my lawyer educated me on was that Chuck was coming from a hyper emotional place, right? You ever write a bunch of scathing things to like an ex-lover and but you don't send the letter, but you get your anger out. That's kind of what Chuck did, except for
Right.
he filed the case.
Yeah. 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 I guess, you know, different people will respond differently to different types of things that happen. And, I don't necessarily think we're all in a position to try to create a one size fits all as to how people are going to respond. But
Yeah.
to me, Colette, but still, this was one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard of. And I thought to myself, how could a lawyer who's supposed to know the legal parameters, how could you actually push it this far? How could you, how something inside you should have said, okay, hold up. I've had my moment of anger. I've had my moment of frustration, whatever the synonyms that apply, but this is too far. Something didn't something didn't click inside there. That button wasn't working.
I think it's the legal system enabled it
Yeah, yeah,
because it's not just Chuck doing
yeah,
that. It's
yes,
you have it in family court, you have it in
yeah.
criminal court.
Oh,
Think about
yes,
the people
yes, and
in
I know
jail
that. Yeah.
that
Like
are
I said, I had my own experience with the legal system, and I saw just firsthand how corrupt and unjust it is.
yep,
But I handled my situation differently. But Colette, I'm happy to say, uh, when it was all said and done, I came out on top, though.
good.
Because I knew that the truth would prevail. I knew that.
Mhm.
I knew it would prevail. So again, I'm glad to hear that your truth prevailed as well.
that makes me happy to hear that you went through it and came out on the other side.
Yeah.
And I think what's so important, like this conversation that we're having, we don't know who could be watching this interview who's in the same situation right now.
Right, right,
So that would be the message. Stay with the truth.
right,
Try
right.
to stay calm. If I could do it all over again, I mean, it was such an emotional thing. I wish I could have brought a little more of the rational side of me into it and just maybe been a little calmer because I really did have a full-on public meltdown.
Right.
Um, yeah, the truth does set you free. You know, you
Yes.
want to take it
Yes.
to if you're being wronged, then you should go in with the attitude that you want to take it to trial, you know.
Right.
Like
Right.
I think with Chuck, trial was like a threat. He knew that there was never going to be a trial, right? Because only 5% of cases go to trial. But to
Mhm.
me, like eventually I was like, yeah, bring it on. Let's go to trial. Let's get a
Mhm.
jury. I will keep fundraising. Um, but yeah, I'm really glad to hear that you came out on the other side. And I think that if we keep telling these stories, you know,
Mhm.
I don't know if you would ever feel comfortable telling your story, but it will help other people
Mhm.
in the same.
Well, as far as my story is concerned, Colette, I won't tell it because it would require me to, uh, expose things about other that I don't want to, and it's not necessary to do so,
Yeah.
because the people who were involved, they have experienced the suffering from what they attempted to do. So I'm not going to go through there and kick them when they're already down.
Absolutely.
Not
I
going to do that. But I
totally.
will I will tell you this, and this is going to be a very uh this comment that I'm going to make is going to potentially upset some people,
Yeah.
but I've said it many times in other circles of conversation when legal things have come up. So I guess I'm going to go on record now. I've never said this publicly, but I'm going to go on record. Uh, and I'll preface my comments with this. If you find yourself involved in a legal situation, you definitely need, if you can, you need to take the time to find a lawyer who knows what in the world he is doing.
Mhm.
So I will tell you this, the experience that I went through a couple of lawyers that, were well intentioned, but just couldn't get it done. Then I found another one that was referred to me, and this guy went in there and ate everybody alive. He ate them, and I'm
Mhm.
using that as an exaggerated expression, but he went in there and conquered. And he pulled me aside one day when we got done, and I said, man, you really let these people have it in there. And this is what he said to me, Colette. Now, whether people will agree with this or not, that's up to them. But he said to me, he said, Skip, he said, I'm gonna tell you something. He said, this legal profession is full of lawyers who don't know what in the world they're doing. He said, 85% of them don't know what they're doing. 15% are good, they know what they're doing, and they will be a benefit and an asset to their client. He said the other 85%, you're wasting your time and money.
Yeah.
Now, some are going to disagree with that, maybe some will, but from my experience, I said, you know what? I'm not going to mention my lawyer's name, but I said, I think you're right. I think you're right.
And it's okay, like if you're not vibing with the first lawyer, it's okay to get a
Yeah,
different one, you know?
yeah, yeah,
Um, and then I would go back to, that feeling in your gut.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I think you know if the lawyer has your back or not,
Yes,
you
yes,
know?
you do. So, Colette, with all that having been said, we know you got a second book that you're writing. Anything else on the horizon for you?
Yes. So as far as me as an artist,
Hmm.
I'm taking like little baby steps, getting back out there. I just started a Spotify page. I recently put out a cover of Pearl Jam's Oceans, which is on my Spotify page. I'm finding my way as an artist again. Because for a while I just did not want to be out there like as me as an artist. Um, Taking my time with it. And I am also doing session work here and there. So I'm kind of a little bit of an open book right now. I went through this whole journey, and now that I'm on the other side, I feel like there's good things out there, and I'm open
Mhm.
as to what those things can be.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna just take, one little step at a
yeah,
time.
right.
Get back at it.
And just see what shows up, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay.
this time I'm gonna vet it properly.
Okay. All right. So Colette, do you have a website or any place that people could contact you if they want to, and if you're open to that?
Yeah, sure. There's two different ways to contact me. On my Instagram, it's Colette MCLA. You can contact me there. And then I also have a Quora page where I actually give advice to people who are in the music industry.
Hmm.
I try to veer them on the right path. Like, these are 10 things that I did. Don't do that.
Hmm.
So you can also contact me at Quora at Colette McClafferty. You can find me over there too, and also message me. I'm still working on the website, but
Okay. All
yeah,
right.
sure.
Oh, okay. Well, Colette, listen, thank you so
Thank
much for joining us here on Skip's Artist Showcase. And your story is unique. It needs to be heard. And I
you.
think it needs to continue to be heard because these types of potentials, I think, are always going to be possibly present.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Both with when it comes to what's going on in the legal system, but also with the media, and and also just I've become a big age diversity
Hmm.
activist in the entertainment industry. That's something that I really like to talk about, is like embracing your age and seeing more of that, more age diversity in all areas of music. So
Okay. Well, hey, Colette, we wish you continued success in all the things that you will pursue.
thank you. Thank you so much for this. Has been just incredible and another little piece in the healing process. So thank you.
Okay. Well, listen, you have a great rest of the day, and we'll be in touch, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
All right.
Everybody, Colette McLafferty.
Bye. Awesome.